Oh, welcome to the Blue Swan. Today we are lucky to have Patrick Kilpatrick. He's a member of the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, has been published in virtually every outlet under the sun, and has a long, long list of credits over the last 40 or 50 years. And on that note, would you mind introducing yourself and anything you wanted to mention?
Hi, it's Patrick Kilpatrick, and I wanted to say I hope that you have a joyous holiday season and make sure you hug everybody you love, and we all work together to make the world a better place.
Thanks. That's very humble. Would you mind telling us a little bit about the impact of being raised by someone who was a former Navy SEAL with a Purple Heart and Silver Star, who also founded Cigna Corporation on your style as an actor and any roles you played?
Well, it's a really interesting question. First of all, he wasn't a Navy SEAL. He was an underwater demolition team guy. Actually, what they were called beach jumpers or scouts and raiders in some places, an underwater demolition team. They didn't become the Navy SEALs until 1962 with John F. Kennedy merged the UDT with the Navy SEALs. But so he was trained as an underwater demolition team beach jumper. Um, Certainly, my father had a huge impact on me. In my egotism as a child, I didn't really ask him a lot about what he did in World War II until pretty close to his death. I wish I had talked to him more about that. He talked about World War II in historical terms, but he really didn't get into the personal things that he had done until I asked him directly about 2 weeks before his death. Um, so, how did that impact me? In my best state, in my best persona, I hope I embody my father's instincts for tenacity and courage. I know I'm a blend of my mother and my father, so I don't have always his absolutely even-tempered personality. He was a very gentle giant. He was 6'6", and really, I don't ever remember him raising his voice ever. So he was probably the finest man I've ever known. I'd like to think I embody some of uh, his discipline and tenacity. And I swim regularly. I'm not equating myself in any way to an underwater demolition team person, but I have an affinity for water. And I go swimming on a daily basis, and it's freezing. And I think about those guys all the time and what they endured. As I've tried to build a company, Uncommon Dialogue Films, I think I got some of his CEO energy, if you will, or gene. So I think that had an impact. I really don't know that I'll ever live up to his level of grace or accomplishment. I'm not necessarily, I think about those things, but I don't, I know everybody's life is their individual. One of the things is he never put pressure on any of us to do anything but what made us happy. So I marvel at his ability to not bring work home, because I can't ever. Meanwhile, I seem like I work 24/7 to get our things done, where he seems to have balanced home life a lot better than I ever have.
Thanks. Yeah, so my father was actually a naval captain. He had the Expert Pistol Award, and so um, I appreciate you answering that question. And so, before you got into acting, you worked as a bodyguard for bands like Jefferson Airplane and Pink Floyd, Grateful
Yeah.
Dead. I'm wondering if you would be willing to sort of take us, down the rabbit hole and then through the dark side of the moon into any amusing war stories you may or may not have from that time.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, that was a glorious experience. I consider myself really blessed to have done that. I mean, you said Jefferson Airplane, and I was on the stage with them, and you're supposed to protect them. And they had hired a stripper. So a beautiful nude girl came walking on the stage. And at the time, they hadn't told me. So I thought, this is just another crazed fan. And so I picked her up and carried her off of the stage. And eventually it was revealed that she was part of the act that night. So, but she wasn't pleased that I picked her up and carried her off of the stage. Um, I had a lot of things. I got into a fist fight with Dennis Wilson because he tried to get backstage and I didn't recognize him. And he was really abusive and got physical really quickly. So I thumped him without knowing. I was actually beating up one of the people who belonged on the stage, but it was self-defense, really. So a lot of things happened. It was a really interesting time because uh, concert promoters and concert goers at that time really didn't want police at concerts. And so, and it was in New York. Eventually, it got very, very violent. Uh, I came out unscathed, but there were people who were stabbed and all kinds of shotgunned to death. And after about a year and a half, it never was meant to be a career. I made a lot of money doing it. And I was working as a writer during the day and not making a lot of money at that, just because I was an introductory writer at companies and stuff. That changed pretty quickly as I ascended in that career. But um, eventually, it got so violent, I said it's probably a good idea to duck out. When the police came back in and ended up having to shotgun a kid to death, I thought, well, maybe this is not a good thing to keep doing. But was it glorious to do? I mean, come on, being on the stage with Jimi Hendrix and Jethro Tull, and whether you like these individual bands or not, Procol Harum, Quicksilver Messenger Service. Interestingly enough, with Quicksilver Messenger Service and Grateful Dead, of course, you were sharing the security with the Hells Angels, which really amounted to letting the Hells Angels do whatever they wanted to do. Because if you got into a fight with the Hells Angel, you were going to have a fight with about 30 of them, and that was not going to end up well for you. So, I saw a lot of great bands, Rod Stewart, Jeff Beck, a lot of different venues, Pink Floyd, when they had a one-third size plane crash into the stage in New Jersey. That was part of the act. Um, it was pretty amazing. Very corrupt, made a lot of money. I mean, nobody made a big deal out of it, but it was very corrupt. People would give you $100 and you just let them in. And they paid us with 50 tickets to each show, and you were allowed to scalp them. And that was one of the ways that you got paid. Uh, yeah, it was crazy. It was really fun. I mean, frankly, being on the stage with groups like that, I really couldn't go to a concert for decades after that because everything was a letdown after that. I think finally somebody gave me tickets to go see Madonna and YouTube and Katy Perry, and so I went back to, but I've never really gotten back into concerts since then because how do you match actually being on stage with the guys, you know, and uh and the women of that period, you know?
That is an incredible story. I remember the stories about how the Rolling Stones hired Hell's Angels and they paid them in $500 worth of beer. And so it's interesting to hear about how this was sort of across concerts that, were in New
Yeah,
York and
that
California.
was the Fillmore East. Yeah. Well, I remember I was standing there one time. They had a big statue like Venus de Milo in the lobby of the Fillmore East. And the Hells Angels just came in and crated it up and took it out. What was I going to do? Not much, you know. Fantastic for a musical thing because the in those days, Quicksilver, Messenger Service, and the Grateful Dead, they played for like 9 hours. They just guys would walk off the stage and somebody else would come back on and play, and everything was extended acid rock and everything. So the concerts would last 9 hours or so. So it was just much more of a festival deal. Uh, yeah, I was very privileged to see that.
Thanks. And so I think it was after that you've essentially been published in every magazine under the sun, from Rolling Stones to Sports Illustrated or Cosmopolitan to
I
stuff.
wasn't actually published in Rolling Stone. Let me make it clear.
Okay.
I was published in the sense that I was splitting my time between advertising writing and journalism. And I was very lucky because the advertising writing was very high paid, relatively speaking. And so that would pay for the journalism stuff often because you didn't editorial, you don't get paid as much money, but you do that for the rewards that gives. So Rolling Stone, I did get some editorial assignments from them, like they were going to send me to Africa, but that didn't manifest itself. But I did do advertising writing for them, what we call circulation ads. So it was advertising designed to send readers to the magazine. The same thing with Life magazine and all the Time Inc. magazines. I was on the 32nd floor and getting paid a lot of money as an advertising writer, and then that would allow me to go to South America and do an article and the journalistic stuff.
Okay.
So
Um,
when I say I worked for just about every magazine in New York, it's true, but it was either in the capacity as an advertising writer or as a journalist.
okay. Do any of the publications or ads you made stand out to you as of this day, or was it just a time before acting?
No, they particularly stands out as Interview, Andy Warhol's magazine, which was, people don't realize that was along with Life magazine, was probably the preeminent photographic magazine of its time. Um, Edited by a wonderful guy named Robert Hayes, who unfortunately died in the first rush of the AIDS epidemic, but a great editor. And he was really responsible for what caused Interview to be such a great magazine because they'd have the finest photographers doing portraiture of people, and maybe only getting paid $50. I'm very grateful. They paid me 200 an article. And then you'd have a interview text, opposite the big picture. So, and I was working at Time Inc. at that time as an advertising writer. So that was a nice detour for that. Certainly, my time at Interview, I did maybe 5 or 6 pieces for them. Got fired twice and rehired back twice for different reasons. Uh, Going to South America to write articles on athletics and cocaine was a really interesting stuff. I think it was a magazine called Quest, whatever the year was. Quest. It changed title each year, Quest 89, Quest 90. Um, so I went to South America with them, and that was great for them. Uh, I'm very grateful for all the advertising writing because it gave me a lot of rhythm. and a lot of poetic stuff. I mean, if you think about it, advertising writing is very much like a song. Every word's got to count, and um, it's really almost like poetry in a sense. Every word of an advertisement has to be very skillfully done. And that was a literate form of advertising. We relaunched Life magazine by creating ads that go out and cause people to reach in their pockets and send money. And so that's a great proving ground for a writer to know how to write compellingly to cause people to take action. Even in screenwriting, that has a place, you know. Although screenwriting, I had to strip a lot of, a lot of. We just joking the other day of a script is 183 pages. Well, we'll remove 40 pages worth of adjectives. You know, it's a very streamlined. It's got to sing, but it's very streamlined kind of writing.
All right, and so you have a lot of scripts underway, and one of them is redacted. And so I'm wondering if you would mind talking a little bit about what goes through your head as you're writing. Are you thinking of the financing aspects, like optioning screenplays? I know that you've traveled a lot to raise money for productions, or do you focus more on the art?
Um, Well, first of all, I'm going to let you into a little secret. There is no project called Redacted. Those are all fake titles and fake posters because we very are security minded about our intellectual property. So those are fake posters on IMDb Pro and stuff. They sometimes have a connection to our real posters and our real projects, but there is no project called Redacted. And then I think the other part of your question is, are you thinking about the art and the commerce and everything? There's no question you have to do a blending of the two supremely because um, because that's movie making. If you don't make money on the movie, if you don't make people money, then you're not going to be in the business for very, very long. So we're very conscious of the economic realities as well as the obsessional creative stuff that has to occur. So you're blending those two things as you're doing that. I mean, you never know where something's going to come from. I might be on a fundraising trip to Texas like I was recently, and all of a sudden you get a blindingly wonderful creative idea that fits into a script that you're working on. So I don't really control the timing of whether you're dealing with creative things. By the way, I think finance is really creative. Um, I mean, just today, I had a Zoom call today, and we realized at the end of it, it was the first of its kind that we're trying to cover too much ground in one call. So people can only absorb certain amount of information. So you're always honing your methodology and you're honing your presentational skills, and you have to really read the room and all of that. I tend to err on the fact of wanting to give people the whole story, and sometimes that's just way too much. Um, Hopefully, it works out because maybe they'll be inspired by something you said. But people's minds, particularly when you're doing the talking, they only go on for so long. You know, I give you a good example, like an actor's reel. I'm really proud of my acting in movies, and I think I did a good job, particularly when you cut them in my favor. But the bottom line is, um, if you have an actor's reel and it's 15 minutes of great stuff, I mean, really excellent stuff, that's too much. Nobody pays any attention. So I don't have a reel that's much more than I have six reels and they're 3 minutes long. People can't absorb. If I watch 15 minutes of excellent stuff, I get bored. Now that doesn't mean to say that I don't like a 3 hour movie. I do, but you're always thinking about, are we losing people's attention with what you're doing? And do you need to slow down and be more quiet? You know, I hope I'm answering your question correctly.
Yeah, you definitely are. And I think that there's very much an art to financing and deal structure and private equity, which carries over a little bit into film production that I know much less about. Um,
Well,
and
there's always a deal to be made on some level. If there's an axiom that I have, I realize there is a deal that can be creative and that can be financially viable. You know, there's always a deal to be, whether it's a small company, a little company. Now, whether you want to take the time with every little company or something is quite another. But, you know, there's a, I come from, there's a deal that can be made no matter what you do. Some people don't come from that. They want the deal exactly the way they want it, and that's the reality you have to live with.
yeah, there's always an ebb and flow in negotiations. It's people have joked about comparing salespeople to actors in some ways, and I think that there's a little bit of truth to that.
Well, I
Um,
wish I was better at it sometimes. My wife is really brilliant at that. Um, have after long experience in the real estate situation, I do things in my style, and there's certainly much more I could have learned about it. Certainly, we're very involved every day in trying to figure out how to close deals. Sometimes you have to just not do anything and let the deal close itself. I can't tell you that I know all about it. The thing about my life, it seems like I'm always going into uncharted territory. And that's a great thing, but it's also a thing that you're learning as you're going along. So it is what it is.
Thanks. Um, and so, um, can you think of any ways in which some of your previous roles in anything from The Toxic Avenger to Under Siege 2 have sort of impacted, how you perform in existing roles, like The Year of Living Dangerously?
Um, I would like to think that my abilities as a transformational actor are growing uh, exponentially from those days. Uh, each job is very different. Um, I tend to be very improvisational, and the comics I really admire. They look at a room, and within 3 minutes of the time they've arrived at an event, they're coming up with scathing humor that's specifically to that environment. So, maybe just the valet parking situation, they're able to make cutting jokes about. So I try to do as much advance work as I possibly can. But then you've got the moment that you're on the set, you have to look around you and see what's the environments there. Um, and go with that as well as I mean, tend to improv a lot. However, it's an illusion because it's stuff I've written a lot before and even memorized before, at least conceptually, so I can improv uh, specifically in the parts. You asked about Toxic Avenger. I mean, that was a long time ago, and yeah, and by the way, I think that's good advice. I just had fun with it. I would think I was heavily influenced by Malcolm McDowell in Clockwork Orange by that one a little bit. Um, so looking at the environment, you got a little baby eating tacos and just coming up with what you're doing. A lot of people think acting is not a creative act; it's more of a reactive thing. I disagree wholeheartedly. I think you do all the back work and then you have to be ready to shed it or elaborate on it. I mean, I just did a horror film in Atlanta and I had done a lot of preparation of biblical. I was playing a minister, a reverend guiding this wagon train. And I'd done a lot of biblical stuff and gotten it ready. And some of that had to played a part. And then I had to discard a lot of it because you find yourself in a scene where all of a sudden just the basics, the essentials are what's required. I try not to fall back on tricks that I've used before for other parts, you know. So you're constantly reinventing whatever you're doing. The same thing is true of script writing. Each project is so different. You're coming up with different structures and different things in order to articulate that particular story in a very, very different way than that's been done before. So to me, that's what's most exciting about this stuff. And then there's the nitty gritty of this stuff. I tend to choose pretty challenging material as a scriptwriter in a film company. Um, they're not always easy. You know, we don't put out stuff that's like other things too much, you know?
There's always a joy in pursuing a challenge, and I think that there is a lot of creativity that has to go into designing scenes that are really cold-blooded, like killing somebody with an ice cream machine in Toxic Avenger.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I didn't make that up, though. They made that. Those guys did a great job with what they're doing. I thought it was the worst movie in all of civilization's history when I was doing it, but I wasn't in touch with that sort of gory irony that struck that generation so well. I mean, it's just not my thing. Uh, so it was illuminative to just listen to it and watch what happened with the movie. I'm much more of a Saving Private Ryan 300 kind of a guy, or a Moliere kind of guy, or something like that. So schlock is not really been my thing, but the bottom line is there's a huge audience that spoke to, you know, and was communicative. So much of what we do is generational too. So we have like a young person working here. You need the insights of a lot of different people to create stuff that's going to resonate with a lot of people, you know. I mean, young people, what do they care about World War II? You know, what do they care about? Some do, some don't. And I mean, I met somebody the other day. Not only did I meet somebody who didn't know who Marlon Brando was, but I met somebody who didn't know who Jimi Hendrix was. So what does that tell you? They've got their own lives. They're living in their own times, and it's a very, very different one.
That's a shame. I mean, Purple Haze and The Godfather are classics, and
I think it's a shame, but a generation was 20 years when I was growing up. A generation is now 2 or 3 years.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, those were almost 60 years ago, so I think it's understandable for a younger generation. Um, but yeah, trauma films were not for everybody, and they often operated under the guise of it's so bad that it's good in a way. Or the acting is far more nuanced in films like Saving Private Ryan. And so you mentioned sort of playing a father or a pastor, and I'm wondering if any of the roles you did, such as Not in Minority Report or Father Patrick Brian Catalyst, stand out to you as a favorite, or if there's another one that comes to mind.
You know, it's a really good question, but it's often asked. Honestly, I get something great out of every job. It's very different. There's something different that comes out of every job. Uh, I just feel really blessed that I continue to be able to do that stuff and continue to, you know, continue to be of service. Um, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of highlights, but sometimes they're the highlights for, I mean, I did a movie called The Cellar, and I got my dog on it, that passed away a while back. So that was memorable. But the acting and the people on it were really memorable too. Each job is really different. I mean, I joke around. I mean, obviously, Spielberg selecting you for something is a real high thing. And a big budget studio movie is a really great thing. But I've done jobs that only took a weekend, and you drop in and you're shooting your own firearms and doing your own stunts, driving and screaming an Irish dialect out the window, and you're paid in cash and you're gone. So it's like they were all meaningful. They were all meaningful for me. What mostly we want to do as a film company is make things that are meaningful for others, you know. Uh, that's basically it. Yeah.
Thanks. And I think the last description you gave was beautiful. It sounds almost more like a Dropkick Murphy song than Hollywood, which is
What's that?
refreshing. It sounds almost more like a Dropkick Murphy song than something you see in Hollywood.
I don't know who that is. Dropkick?
Dropkick Murphys. It's like an Irish rock band, and so
Oh,
um
oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure I'd like them.
yeah, yeah. So if you've seen The Departed, Shipping Up to Boston is one of their most well-known songs. It's very,
Is
very
that where you're located? Where are you located?
so I'm in LA, but I lived on the East Coast for a while, and so
Yeah.
DC, New York. I think Boston was always too cold.
Yeah, I haven't had to deal with snow except in Sundance or something for a long time. We have such warm weather here that my wife and I get really enthralled and romantic with anything that's close to inclement weather. When it rains here, we love it. So um, those seasons are awesome, though.
Yeah, California weather is nice. I think it's always interesting to see that, people think anything like under 60, 70 degrees is cold, which is a lot different from the East Coast. But so you're an avid shooter, right?
I have been. I was for decades, but we got so immersed in moviedom and producing movies and writing them, and we're very lucky with getting some script assignments and things that came our way that willingly I just have done nothing. Maybe I've gone shooting 3 or 4 times since COVID started. They've been meaningful when I did it. One, I learned I had totally lost all skill with a shotgun, which was shocking. So those things are sort of coming back as I do a little bit more. But yeah, it was my martial art for a couple of decades, 25 years or so. I'm still involved in the sense that I have a friend who's got a ranch, and it was really great to go back up and play with the weapons and shoot and stuff like that. And I did that with my son. Um, but you get older, you got to choose what you spend your time doing. And if we're going to make the kind of dent that I would like us to make as a production company and as creators of movies, you're talking 5, 6, 7 projects, as well as balancing the books and making the company tick over and everything move forward, and at the same time have a relationship with your family members and having it meaningful. There haven't been a lot of time for hobbies in the last 7 or 8 years. I mean, a hobby for us is playing with a grandkid for a little while, or maybe going to the Cannes Film Festival. Swimming, I do a lot of swimming. You also have to keep yourself together and healthy. Um, so I do a lot of cold plunging and swimming, and uh, I've tapered off on the weights and stuff a little bit, but that's nice to get back to it. So many things as you get older are alleviated if you use your body. And script writing involves sitting down. So you got to get out and use your body. So um, I try to keep a balance. The guns are there. If the Chinese start coming down the street, I guess I can pick off a couple before they overwhelm us. So that sounds facetious, but geopolitically, it may very well happen.
There are a lot of parallels to World War II across the globe right now, but I think that that's a slightly different story.
Yeah, I think it's complicated by we have so much inter complicity by international entities now. It's who are the bad guys, is a little bit harder to discern now. So for me, the ideals that America was founded are still paramount and worth my father fighting for. But I think he would be kind of appalled by some of the complicity that is going on right now with totalitarian maniacs and stuff like that. Um, there doesn't seem to be a lot of accountability at a high level now. So that's troubling. And what's troubling even further is that people elect people who are complicit and who are followers of people who are really, in my opinion, ready to destroy the very things that make this country really, really great. Um, However, one remains hopeful and one remains that this is a blessed life and we need to pass something along to our grandkids that will be meaningful. So,
Thanks. A lot of people who are well into their 70s talk about, reaching a point where you begin to think about what you leave behind. And so I appreciate the additional insight on politics and everything else.
well, I've been thinking about that for a long time. I mean, much more so in the last couple of decades than I mean, when I was younger, you think all I want to do is absorb sensations and life and come to conclusions. Eventually, you start thinking about what exactly, and I'm not so sure it's a legacy because look, we just talked about people don't know who Jimi Hendrix and Marlon Brando are. It's talking about whatever, you know. I wouldn't have any problem just doing nothing probably for the rest of my life, but I feel a responsibility to our clients and to our stories and to the generations behind. Or ahead, the generations ahead. What we try to do at the film company is actually produce things that we consider to be really meaningful. Now, I know that's a subjective thing. Uh, and I honor and revere a lot of the things that other people do, but they're not necessarily the things that we do. Um, I think there's a lot of ways to be meaningful. Making people laugh is making them feel good about themselves. If a movie can do that, that's great too. I'm thinking Will Ferrell movies. How much healthy laughter has Will Ferrell put into the world? We don't specifically do stuff like that. I wouldn't mind trying if that right things comes up, because a lot of times we take the projects that come to us and we get hired. Um, so I wish they would do a Talladega Nights version of the NFL. Like they've done Blades of Glory and the basketball thing. I wish they would just do an NFL one. So, and I wonder why those guys stop, on a certain level. Where are they now? Where is Adam McKay? He's still very proactive and stuff. But yeah, to do things that make people laugh is probably pretty meaningful, you know.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to mention?
No, we're going back to finish I say no, and then he proceeds to talk for 5 minutes. No, we are going back to finish a movie called Dying for Living, which is an action piece, and my wife and I wrote it, and I'm starring in it with a long list of incredible action icons and champion athletes, people like Egan Machado and Nina Bergman and uh, Costas Mandylor, a warrior of the first rank, and the Wall twins and Cynthia Rothrock, Chuck Liddell playing my brother, and I know we're missing somebody. Who else? I hope I'm not, but really extraordinary people. And the team, Art Camacho and Stefan Colson, the cinematographer, these guys are brilliant in their own right. And I'm really blessed to, it really is all about teams of people when you come to the movies. It's not a solitary process. It takes really good people to drive forward with a vision and to have it come out as an economically successful vehicle too. Um, um, so I've had the privilege recently to work as an actor with some great teams, and we're continuing that with Dying for Living. Hope to finish that in June, and we're setting some things up to shoot in Texas, and we'll get to that as soon as we can. But it's a building process. You know, I often say the Chinese are in for the long game, so we're into it for the long game too.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'll have to check it out. And was it Nina or Cynthia who had the photo on IMDb in the splits with Tusai? Or
That's probably Cynthia.
okay.
She's a wonderful Chloe's just talking about her, she's got such a sassy, wonderful delivery, profane delivery. In this movie, she did Black Creek. I had the privilege of playing her brother in the movie. But what people don't really appreciate is you talk about economics and hard work. They put together a thing just using Indiegogo and Kickstarter, uh, and raised an enormous amount of money relatively, and did a superb job of running the show. And now it's been a big success. And I my respect and admiration for Cynthia and her partner Robert Clancy is just immense. Uh, it's not easy to do stuff on Indiegogo, and it's a testament to her enduring fan base and the interest in retro martial arts movies. She's just an extraordinary figure, and I really am privileged to call her a friend. And there's a lot. I just did a movie with Olivia Gruner, happiest guy as he goes about directing things. Former French commando director, and he put it's called Prayer for the Innocent. That's coming out. Uh, um, Bountiful with Paul and Patty Winters, a very elegant Western coming out. High hopes for that one, and extraordinary script. Very, very wonderful production and put together a great team in Arizona. So there's a lot of good people working at lots of different levels. Did you see Adolescence? And
Um, I does not ring a bell, no. I mean, I
you,
know of the
I,
band.
I hope you should check out Adolescence. It's a great piece. There's people doing really, really good work. Sometimes people say to me, they say, Patrick, there's so much dreck out there. And well, I always say, don't focus on that. There's a lot of great stuff. And there's really creative people working very, very hard to do really cool stuff that's out there.
Okay.
Thanks for listening.
Anytime. Thanks for taking the time to talk with me.
No, my pleasure, man. Good luck with the podcast, and we'll talk to you as things come out. We'll give you a ring back and see if you want to talk more.
I would love to. Thank you.
Okay. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and be blessed. See you soon.
Thanks. Merry
Cheers.
Christmas.